Good evening, folks. Thanks for joining us for another option trading presentation. Tonight we have Sebastian with us, and Mark's going to talk about the butterfly spread, and he's going to share with us his thoughts on at least one. You're going to do one adjustment, right, Mark?
One specific adjustment. I figured rather than go through, all the multitudes, we could just kind of concentrate on one specific approach.
Okay, well, I'll just remind everyone that this is a educational presentation, and Mark's going to share with us his knowledge, but he's not going to be giving you trading advice, and that's something you kind of need to take care of on your own and with the people you rely upon. If you're ready with your presentation, Mark, I'm going to throw the presenter's ball over to you.
Sure thing.
You should have it.
And I do. Show clean. All right, everybody. So today, I thought it'd be, I wrote a piece that is going to be on, it's going to be featured in Stocks, Futures, and Options magazine, I believe in the March issue. And I thought that it might be fun to do a little preview here on managing and dealing with butterfly in a spread that I like to call in an adjustment that I like to call the reverse Harvey. Now, I'm going to explain why I call it the reverse Harvey as we go through, but it's a really interesting way and great way to retain profit, which is one of the things that I find more often than not when I'm dealing with traders. They have almost as much money, almost as much trouble hanging on to the profits of trades that they're already in as they do managing their ways in and out of trades. It always kind of surprises me how difficult a time people have just kind of keeping trades. You'll have people that are too quick to jump out because they want to keep like their little profit, and then when they lose, they let the thing run. Or you'll have people that will let a fly run, and then one day it takes a big move and they lose a bunch of money. So today what we're going to talk about is one of my adjustments to retain profits, and it's called the reverse Harvey. Okay? So the problem, okay? As time passes on a successful butterfly, the sensitivity to larger changes in price begins to increase. You may not know this, but if you look at the slope of your curve as time passes, your trade actually becomes more sensitive to changes in price. Now, you don't notice this because you're above that zero line, but it actually is. And so you become very susceptible to larger price changes. All right, this makes doing nothing with a profitable butterfly a dangerous proposition. Okay, there's nothing worse. And tell me if you've seen this before. You are in a trade. Okay, you're making a bunch of money. You're doing well. All right, you're up 5%, 6%, 7%. You're feeling pretty good about yourself. You know, can't complain too much. The next thing you know, you walk in the next day, and the S&P 500 or the Russell 2000 has moved, 1.5 standard deviations, and this trade that was up 5 or 6% is now flat, even, or even money, or possibly even losing money. Anybody ever seen that? My guess is there should be resounding yeses. All right. So that's why it's such a proposition. The idea is that gamma, okay, from those two short options you have that are at the money, that increases as time passes. It gets exponentially higher. All right. The other problem is those wing deltas. become less reliable. You have this issue of what I like to call fake delta and hidden delta. Okay, and I'll kind of gloss over that concept, but yeah, those deltas become less reliable. That makes a butterfly trade a real problem. All right, so here's a good example. This is a Russell trade I just kind of threw in. And if you look at the different days passing, so the white line represents today. And you see this is from a program called Think or Swim that you guys may or may not be familiar with. I don't know, any of these guys think or swim traders? I'm obviously kidding. And the answer is yes. You can see, if you look at this white line, it's got a really smooth sloping curve. Okay? As you switch to something like, as time passes, you can actually see that this slope begins to get steeper. The change from here from 780 to 790, the change in your profit is bigger than the change in your profit from 780 to 790 on that first day. You're saying, well, Mark, but I'm up money. Well, that's still a problem, though, because the next thing is that the change from 790 to 800 is also a lot steeper. Okay? It doesn't take much of a move to wipe out almost everything you would make on that blue line, which represents 2 weeks from now. And that yellow line, same thing. As we pass, you can see it really starts to kind of taper off. So our profit that we are making on the 11th of February at 790 versus 800, there's a substantial difference. So as the longer we're in this trade, okay, we're making money. That's a great thing. But the risk of staying in that trade increases, okay? The risk of, you're now not only in danger of kind of giving up your investment, you're in danger of giving up everything you've made, okay? Which is the most frustrating thing you could see, okay? So what is the problem? As I was saying, as time passes and we make money, larger moves could potentially make a gain a catastrophic loss. Notice the slope of the lines increases days pass. It is great that we are making money, but our risk of giving it away is high if we do nothing. Okay? It's extremely high. What will we do? All right? While there's no perfect adjustment, there are some things we can do. However, before one can understand the right adjustment, one must understand time decay. Now, one of the things that is most commonly mistaught among option mentors, all right, actually option traders, because this is something that I saw mistaught to guys that were working for professional trading firms, is time decay. I see time decay, I see it not taught properly all of the time. Okay? And here's why. Okay? I think we've all seen this chart, right? I mean, if you're a regular reader of my blog at Option Pit, then you should have seen this chart 100 times. And you may even know where I'm going, because I'm very open about the fact that time decay is not taught properly. But this chart basically explains how, as time passes, the slope of decay gets faster and faster and faster, and it loses, as you can see, a big portion of its decay from 30 days to 0 days. All right? If you look, it's about 3/7 of its decay according to this chart. Okay? Now, is that true? Does it really lose this much? Do options really work this way? Well, you know, the answer is that chart is wrong. Okay? Well, it's kind of wrong. All right? That chart applies to the decay of at-the-money options. Okay? So if you're looking at a butterfly, all right, if we're going back, all right, that chart applies to this option, the 780s. Okay? It does not apply to the 745s. It certainly doesn't apply to the 700s. It doesn't apply to the 815s that we've got here, and it definitely doesn't apply to the 800s. Okay? So those options move very differently. All right. So this is the best drawn example of out of the money and in the money decay that I've been able to find. Okay. Now, what do you guys notice about the language on this graph that I borrowed? If anybody can tell me that language, I will buy them a Mai Tai. Okay? What language is that?
Now, Chuck Eichelberg was the first to answer Italian.
All right. That's close, but not quite. I like Chuck though. I'm still gonna, you know, I'm gonna buy Chuck a Mai Tai anyway. All right.
Let's see. We got James Haffer says it's music.
Well, it's not music either.
It's okay, then Norberto says Portuguese.
Norberto is correct. It's Portuguese. I borrowed this from the Brazilian Stock Exchange. Okay? So it's Portuguese. Good job, Norberto. And you know, it's very easy. Portuguese, Italian, is, you know, tempo and prezzo actually could be out of an Italian book too. So anyway, I like Chuck. I like all people. I have Norberto too, actually. So you can see, what do you notice about this chart though? Yeah, you know what? At the money is really fast inside of 30 days. But these out of the monies and in the monies, if you do the math, there's actually more decay from 60 days to 30 days than there is from 30 to 0. All right? In the monies are just out of the monies with big delta, so there's really no difference. It's just drawn with kind of that extra value there. All right? That in the money is going to go to 0 premium. It will have parity value, but will still go to 0 premium value. And so the reason why I pointed that out is that I had to find a smart guy in Brazil that had drawn up this chart in order to find one that I didn't have to do myself. Okay? Trust me, I have very bad graphic design skills, so you do not want me to design my own. All right? Let me be very clear on that. But that is how poorly this concept is taught in the United States. Okay? So the point is that when do most people enter butterflies?
Chuck says 30 days.
Chuck is correct. Chuck gets 2 Mai Tais now. I'm sending Chuck home in a very, very expensive cab. Yeah, 30 days. So if you look, what do you think the advantage is of putting on a butterfly? Why does it work so well? Well, it's not just that meat has more premium. It's that meat also decays faster. Okay? That is a really powerful advantage. And, you know, I'm the only one teaching this, and now you guys know it. all right, along with my students. All right, that's right. Time decay is much more linear on out-of-the-money options relative to at-the-money. All right? This knowledge has tons of applications for butterfly management. I mean, it really does. Okay? I could get into a lot of the different ways, but I'm going to kind of stick to one specific way. Okay? The story. Okay? All right. Now, one day, does anybody know Dan Harvey, who Dan Harvey is? He's a really great guy, I have to say. You know, one of the sad things about starting this business is that I no longer got day-to-day contact with Dan Harvey, who is just a great kindred spirit and a real brilliant trader. Okay? So one day Dan and I were talking, and his approach to managing butterflies is that over time, as the butterfly became profitable, all right, to smooth out that curve, what he would do is he would buy the meat of the, you know, the thorax, if you will, of the butterfly, and he would sell the wings out further. He'd sell that meat out further. So on the butterfly that we were looking at earlier, if Dan Harvey was doing this, he would buy back the 780s, and he might sell the 790s or the 800s, and then sell the 770s or the 760s. Now, generally, I always do iron butterflies. I think it's really, the reason why I like iron butterflies so much is not because they're any different than butterflies. All right? Anybody who knows anything knows that butterflies and iron butterflies are synthetically the exact same trade. Why I like it is that it's really easy for me to think about the position. I can think about it, you know, like I said, you know, the McDLT. Does anybody remember the McDLT? I'll tell you, my brother John almost cried when they killed that sandwich because he loved it so much. But what was the pitch was you keep the hot side hot and the cool side cool. Well, by doing iron butterflies, it lets me keep kind of in my head, and actually when I'm teaching, keep a put side and a call side. So when I talk about a trade on an iron butterfly, it's the call side. Okay, well that's up here, and it's the put side, which is down here. And so I actually speak that way with regular butterflies too. All right, they're synthetically really the same thing, so who cares? All right. So what Dan would do is he might buy his at-the-money call and then sell, you know, the 790s or the 800s. And that does, in fact, really smooth out this white line or the red line or the yellow line. Okay? And then he would buy back the put and then sell the 770 or the 760. And again, that really smooths out the downside of the curve. All right? It's a really, you know, it's a nice little adjustment. But, you know, as he and I were talking about it, and something didn't sit well with me. All right? I never, ever, ever like buying an expensive option to sell a cheap option. Okay? Hey, there's something about it. Okay? I really, really hate buying expensive to sell cheap. All right? And that's what you're doing. When you buy an at-the-money option, you sell an out-of-the-money option. You're giving up a ton of premium. All right? You're paying for a lot of premium. All right? Now, let me be clear on what I was just describing with Dan. That is a extremely oversimplified explanation of what is a very complex trader who really knows what he's doing. Okay? He knows his stuff. But, you know, it's just this one thing. He had found something that he liked, and he was doing it, and it was doing well. He made money doing it. But all the time he pitched that his goal was to keep that the smoothness in that profit curve. So he wanted these lines to be as smooth as possible. Okay? So I like to call them as Mark Sebastian as possible because I'm so smooth. So I don't know if you knew that, Chris, but that used to be my nickname in college was Mark Smooth Sebastian. Did you know that?
I won't ask you how you got that.
Well, first off, I never got that. That wasn't my nickname. But but I kind of wish it was. Uh, so, I looked at what he was doing, and I said to him, I said, Dan, what if we went the other way? What if we reversed what you were doing? And he said, well, Mark, what do you mean? And I said, what if instead of buying back the meat and selling wings, we sold the wings out that we were long and kicked them in? He said, well, I never really looked at that before. And I said, well, I had neither. So then he and I spent a nice period of time messing around with it, and we realized, hey, you know what? This is a pretty good way of smoothing the chart. Okay? And the next thing you know, I said to him, obviously, because Dan's a good sport, I said, let's call this the reverse Harvey. And he said, Mark, that sounds more like, something the varsity football team would do to the freshmen as a hazing. And I said, no. It has a real good catchy name. So I began calling it the reverse Harvey. And Dan laughed himself silly, and thus was born the reverse Harvey. Okay? And now I'll show you kind of how it works. Okay? The first key is to get the butterfly moving your way. So you want the butterfly to make money. Okay? Generally, the reverse Harvey is a money capturing adjustment, not a money saving adjustment. Although I will show you how it can be used for that as well. Okay? All right? So what's happening is as the butterfly makes money, those wings begin to lose value. Okay? Now, once the wings decay down to units, all right, they're no longer a true hedge of that butterfly. Do we all remember what a unit is? Or do I need to explain that? All right, a unit is an inexpensive option that has very small or non-existent, unreliable Greeks. Okay? Now, I love units when I'm trading to keep in a back pocket in case the market crashes, but they're not great as an actual hedge against a short position. All right? When I like units is I have a butterfly, then I'll buy some put units outside of the butterfly in case the market tanks. All right? That's how a butterfly I was in the flash crash ended up making a ton of money. All right? All right? So now, what we will do is give the wings a kick in to recapture gamma. All right? Meanwhile, the trade is maintaining the majority of its decay. All right? It's a really cool thing. Okay? All right, example. All right? So now I'm going to use option view 6. They've been so kind as to help me out there with, come on. Why is this not? Oh, I wasn't pressing escape. So we go to Jan 4th. There's probably faster ways than to click this through. All right, and I already pre-set up a trade. And yes, I did look ahead to see that we were in something smooth because I didn't feel like, I wanted you to see that this trade as it's supposed to be traded. Okay? Now, a lot of guys will come in and show you kind of after the facts, hey, this is what you should have done, this is what you should have done, this is what you should have done. I'm always wary of this stuff, but I do like to kind of show examples of things that an adjustment working so that you can see how it can apply, because this was a trade that I actually was in spiders that did make money. Okay? Obviously, it was not in SPX. It was something we did on our AM pit report. So, you know, you throw on the trade. All right, we're selling the 1270 call and put. And you can see we've got the 1305 as a long and the 1235 as a long. All right, with about 17 days to expiration. This is a Jan butterfly. So we push forward to Friday, Jan 7th. And hey, we're doing pretty good. We're up a couple $1,000. Okay? If you look at the risk on this chart, you know, a couple $1,000 is almost 20%. That's really nice. All right? Now, what am I worried about? Well, take a look. As time goes by, you know, yes, I make more money, but I also get more sensitive to price changes. And I also worry about this thing really booming outside of the tent. Make sure I didn't add these in already. Nope, I didn't. All right, so now, how would I reverse Harvey? Real simple. I sell that option that's 185, and then I just kick them in, you know, 10 points. And then if you're going to do it on the calls, you have to do it on the puts. All right? And this is what your trade does. So if we superimpose the two trades, and I'm going to reduce those lines so you can see the differences. All right? Take a look at the two trades. Notice the smoothness that I've gained in my adjusted trade relative to my initial trade. Do you see how it's gotten smoother? And what else have I done? Take a look. You know, and we'll get into this more, but this is kind of your standard adjustment. It really smooths things out. All right, so now I will close, and I'm going to convert. Now, if I'm really aggressive, I can reverse Harvey as much as I want. Okay? If I wanted to really get aggressive, if I said, you know what, I'm really nervous about this thing taking off, you know, I could reverse Harvey all the way to where I almost have no risk. All right. Now we're not going to do that. We'll just leave as is. All right. So you can see what we did. A good way, one thing I'd like to note, a good way to reverse Harvey, all right, to know if a strike should be reverse Harvey is, one, you're up money, typically at least 5%. That's the one I like to go for on a butterfly. At least 5%. Now, it's more than that on an ETF because you have to take into account commissions. All right? Especially on something like an ETF where, you know, I know that the places like the broker houses like to tell you that you should do ETFs. Well, ETFs are really commission intensive. I'm not saying they're telling you that because they want the commissions. I'm just pointing out that ETFs are very commission intensive. Okay? You draw your own conclusion. So a good way to tell if a winning trade should be reverse Harveyed is if a wing drops below $2 in the SPX. Note that that number depends on the size of the underlying. You know, $2 in the SPX is 20 cents in the spiders, about. All right? It's the equivalent of like $3 in NDX, or $1.80, $1.50 in the RUT, and maybe $1.25 or a dollar in the OEX. All right, that's a great way to know whether something should be reverse Harveyed. Okay, all right. So at that time, you saw the adjustments we do. All right. Now notice, here's what I love about that reverse Harvey. Okay, is look how little premium we gave up on our top end. We cut our maximum profit from about 22,000 down to about 19,000, but we cut our risk down from 12,000, over 12,000, to about 6,000. That is really, really key. So when you're doing this reverse Harvey, you're not just reducing your risk, you're actually reducing your necessary margin in the trade, which is a really, really nice thing. All right, so what happened? We cut our risk in half. We flattened the curve while keeping a huge portion of our profit potential in the trade. Now, the downside, there is some temporary theta reduction. Okay? I'll show you. I mean, prior to the reverse Harvey, all right, prior to the reverse Harvey, if you look at the different theta numbers, the non-Harveyed at 1270 is collecting $300 a day. The Harveyed one is collecting $200 a day. So you give something up. But in relative terms, the amount of risk that you lose, all right, the amount of risk you take off, totally worth it. Absolutely worth it, almost every time. All right, so step 4, we manage the trade. If it stays within the tent, trader may reverse Harvey again. So let's kind of walk through this thing. I don't even remember what's going to happen. I think this trade does really well going forward. Yeah, see, we're making even more money. Now we're keeping an eye on those 1295s. All right. Now you're all up. If you look, you're really doing well. You know, there's no rule that says you can't reverse Harvey again earlier. All right. You're now up $2,700. You don't have to, though. All right, so we can look at it and talk about it and figure out. I don't think I did. I may have. I don't. I'd have to double check. All right, but you can see we lost $1,000. Now, how would it have been if we hadn't done anything? If we had reversed Harvey? Let's take a look. And you could just do like a little mini reverse Harvey. You can see you're really pulling that thing in tight. You could go crazy and turn it into something like this. If you're one of those people that never wants to lose money, well, guess what? You're never going to lose money trading this way. But let's just do a standard one. And let's see how much better we would have done if we'd reverse Harvey. And you know, we were pretty close here. 265 is certainly close, especially with 10 days to expiration. What the? Let me go forward that half an hour. And you know, it ends up being about the same, but now you never know with the option view because it can move around on you. But You know, if we reverse Harvey again, we got nothing to fear. I think this thing really runs up on us. Take a look at this. We're now up 2,500 bucks. We're sitting right on our wing. All right, and look. What do you notice here? You have to reverse Harvey. Now, when I'm trading, I never buy an option where the value is under $3 in the SPX. I won't do it. That's just me. Now, I can try and see if I can reverse Harvey one more time. The problem is now I've got something that looks like this. All right, I'm outside of my tent. That basically is your hint to take it off. Okay? If you notice, all right, trade escapes the tent is generally prudent to exit. All right? Step 6, once max target profit has been reached, exit or pull trade super tight. All right? Now, I like to teach my students about two different types of profit. They've got their target profit, which is 10% or 15% or 20%. And then they've got their max target profit. That is a number beyond that. You know, you guys ever have that feeling where, you know, you've got a winning trade and you get up so much but you're not sure whether you should exit or not? You feel bad about exiting? Well, the way I stop myself from that problem is I will set up this max target profit. When I reach that, I will tighten up a trade so much that it basically has to just sit there for this thing to make or I'm out. Okay? You know, just for fun, let's keep with this reverse Harvey and see how this thing does. Because we got a week. I think Friday we kind of really peak out, don't we? So you can see we reverse Harvey this thing. We're now 10 bucks out, and we're still up 1,500 bucks. Now we're going to look at these, and let's just see where we close out today. I'll bet you this thing, I think it falls right back in, doesn't it? That's not bad, right? 2,900 bucks. I'll take it. Now you could even be sitting here reverse Harveying some more. And by that I mean turning this into a vertical at certain points. So there are all sorts of different, the point is that I think you guys are starting to see kind of the power of this adjustment. It really helps us kind of deal with a problem. All right, other uses. It can prevent a whipsaw. Okay? So imagine this. You have, I don't know, anybody thrown on a butterfly in the last couple of months and had it threatened to the upside? It gets threatened. Or in '09, they're trading something where it gets threatened to the downside, then it swings up and gets threatened to the upside. Well, if you use reverse Harveys, you can actually, I love that I use them, you use reverse Harveys. If you use reverse Harveys, you can actually reduce some of that risk. I will show you how. So let's go down to November 15th. All right, and do I have that trade on already? No. There we go. So the trade I've thrown on is an SPX butterfly. We throw on the 1200, and I just picked some strikes. The 1200, 1140, 1260 fly. Okay? You can see what it looks like right there. What the? I must have something in there that shouldn't be. Let me deal with this. I will re-put it on. All right, so now we'll buy the, same difference. I never understood that expression. People say the same difference. What does that mean? You know, it seems like kind of a silly expression if you think about it. Am I the only one that feels that way? See, why is this thing giving that weird curve on the top end? That doesn't seem right. Ah, well. All right. So the next day we push forward, and I picked this day on purpose because I think we tank out. All right, so you can see we're definitely being threatened. What is in there? Oh, there's something else in there. Let's see. Sell, sell, buy, buy. That's these Jans. Okay. That's what's throwing us off. There's our chart. So now we're definitely being threatened here. All right. So we go to make an adjustment. Adjustment I like to make. Let's see. We got a pretty long delta. I'm going to try and cut that thing down by about, half. So you guys will get to see some sort of adjustment, and then I'll sell it at the money. I'd probably do 3. All right. So you can see the adjustment we've made here. Now the problem is that this option's now gotten really cheap too, as we've moved down. Let's, I might reverse Harvey this thing, and we'll do something like that then. And, it's going to give you this weird delta. It may actually make you long. You're not as long as many as you think. But just for simplicity, let's do even this. Okay? And then I will sell 7. And what is 65 bucks away from 11.70? I'll buy the 11.10s. Going on here? So actually we might do 10 of these because we want to sell at the money. Why do you sell at the money, do you think? Because you want that premium. All right. And, if you're one of those people that says, I don't like that risk, you can do something like this as well. There's all sorts of different ways to do it. It's not really, we're not really dealing with the adjustment itself. So, but you can see you've really gotten that kind of long theta down, all right? So now we push forward a couple of days. And the market whips back, okay, to 1,200. And look at what happened here. Our options picked up a bunch of value. Our 1260s are worth the exact same amount. Okay? Let me show you the difference. 2360 versus, I'm going to remove that reverse Harvey. You made an extra $1,000 on that whipsaw. Okay? And that's that's a nice powerful tool to have by your side is, hey, this trade you know, they're kicking it in. Now they're giving some screwy deltas up here. That's what the issue is. But this trade is, you know, paying me to take this thing on. That's pretty nice. Okay, and I'm getting protection from that whip back. You know, and it's great because I think we had a huge rally here. And if you hung on till Monday, November 22nd, you're sitting pretty. Never mind. So, and there you have it. But you can see how this can be used as a nice adjustment, as a nice whipsaw prevention. All right, so summary. Traders should use at-the-money theta decay to their advantage. All right, there are a lot of ways to manage a winning trade. The reverse Harvey is one of them, and it can be used as a profit keeper or to prevent whipsaw. All right, now I want to tell you, before we get to questions, I want to tell you about something I've got starting Monday. All right, you knew I was going to come here with the sales pitch. Sorry, you know, this will take 2 minutes. I'm doing this Future Pros prep course, and it's going to be intensive, and it's going to be 6 to 8 weeks, depending on how busy we get in, how much we get into it. And the idea is that, you know, there's a lot of people who have read a lot of books and done a lot of things, okay, but they've never gotten mentoring. But one, they don't even know whether or who to go to because they don't have the knowledge to understand what they need, and they're kind of afraid to jump in with both feet because most mentoring courses are thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. This course was actually designed to kind of bridge that gap, to let you know, to let you figure out whether A, you're ready for mentoring, and B, to help you kind of figure out what you need. All right? Some people need a $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 course. Some people need a $1,000 course. All right? Some people need, you know, a no course and shouldn't trade. There are a lot of people that shouldn't trade. All right? So the course is going to go through price action of options, volatility, the Greeks, income spreads, speculative spreads, and basics of position management. All right? It begins Monday, and here's going to be the deal. All right? And this is the best deal I have out there. All right? This is better than what I've got on the commercial on my podcast. This is better than everything I've got out there. 25% off the price. All right? Use the coupon code OCPREP discount. OC is for Option Club. Prep, obviously it's prep, and then discount. All right? Now, do we have questions for me specifically now involving the reverse Harvey? Chris?
I'm combing through these real quick. So basically, I'm just going to kind of rattle through these, and a couple of them are just asking for confirmation. So what Dan was doing was converting his iron butterfly into an iron condor by rolling the short options or spreading them a little bit wider.
Yeah. He was doing it in a much more complex way than I described it. But yes, that is what he was doing.
Let me see if there were a couple good ones in here.
Dan's a great guy. I love him. I really do.
How do you decide how wide to make the butterfly to start with? So that
standard deviation.
Harvey.
Standard deviation is what I use. When I'm putting together a butterfly, I assume I'm going to be in it for 20 days, and I use the at-the-money volatility to set a 20-day standard deviation based on the price. So that would be, in the case of, if I was really trying to seriously set up a butterfly for that January date we were looking at, which was inside 20 days, okay, for a standard butterfly. I think it was January 4th, okay? When I'm inside of 20 days, I calculate to the Wednesday of expiration, all right? So whatever number of days that is. So we're expiring today, 17 days, so it's 14 days. So I would say, all right, we're trading 1270. That is a volatility of course the vols don't match. Why would they? let's see, 13 and 15. We'll call it 14%. Okay? So that would be 14 over 365 square root. Multiply that times the price, times our strike price, which is $12.70. And then I'd multiply that times the volatility, which is 14%. Remember, guys, volatility is our percent. So I really would have set this thing 35 points wide, which actually I think is what I set it at, didn't I? All right? Does that make sense?
Okay. We got a question here that says, once you roll one side, would you roll it again since the market is already at your short strike?
Once I roll one side, would I roll it again? I don't know exactly what he meant by that.
I'm not entirely...
Would I kick in my wings again? Absolutely. Absolutely. If it stays at my short strike, I will reverse Harvey up to 2 or 3 times. And the idea is that I've set up trades, Chris, you'll love this. I've set up reverse Harveys where my P&L graph, the entire P&L graph, was above my zero line. It was really great. Really great. So, a lot of fun.
There was a question in here somewhere, something about the idea of what if the market moves shortly after you put your butterfly on. And I don't remember exactly how it was phrased, but that was the gist of it.
That is a whole nother conversation. But yeah, that's something that before you trade a butterfly, you should know what you're doing in that situation, I would say. The one thing I always tell people is, you're talking to a trader, or you're talking to a guy starting a trading business, all right? He's starting a hedge fund. And he says to you, hey, Chris Smith, give me $100,000, all right? Now, if that guy knew as much about options as you do, all right, would you give him the $100,000? And if the answer is no, then you shouldn't be trading. All right? At least, certainly not $100,000 bucks. All right.
What spread, Mark? What spread is narrow enough that you'd stop reverse Harveying because it's now too narrow?
Oh, that really depends. $10 at a certain point. I mean, at a certain point, you're going to end up buying back your meat. I'll sit there and reverse Harvey for, I had one on that was, I had a trade on that was literally in diamonds, that was literally a point wide. It was the 16, 17, 18 fly because I'd reverse Harveyed it in so tight.
What percentage of the time do you hold your butterflies to expiration versus taking them off a certain number of days prior?
I don't ever really hold them to expiration. Okay. But I'll hold them as long as I think that they're viable. All right. That's the neat thing about reverse Harveying. You can pull this thing in and just let ride it through expiration week. Okay. Because like I said, you can theoretically get one of these where even if it goes completely outside your tent, you're making 10, 15%. I'll ride those as long as I can.
We've got a question that says, do you ever do a Harvey versus a reverse Harvey? And if so, how do you choose between the two?
Me, typically not. I imagine there'd be situations where that would make sense. If you had the time you would do a Harvey versus a reverse Harvey is if you had what we call a smile skew. Okay? And that is I'm sure you guys have heard me talk about volatility skew. The times where a Harvey can make sense is when you get a curve that for me, get a curve that kind of looks like that. So you're selling here, or so you're buying back here, and selling actually a higher implied volatility. All right. If I can sell a nice high implied volatility, then I may go for it. All right. Another time I might do it is if I think that the wings are overpriced. Okay. If everything's fair value, or if all things are kind of fairly priced, I'm always going to reverse Harvey. If there's a major mispricing on part of the out-of-the-money curve, then your standard Harvey makes a lot of sense.
I've got a couple of questions here. People are asking about the special deal you're talking about, whether there's a link that they need to use, or how do they take?
Yeah, you know, if you go to optionpit.com, and you go to the events tab, you may recognize there. It's right here. Okay, it's under events, so it's on right on my home page, and you just click sign up, and obviously you would delete this. And then you would type in, obviously, OC Prep discount. Apply to order. All right. So there you go. A coupon discount of $150 will be deducted from your order at checkout. Kind of neat, right?
Very good.
All right. So that is I was giving out a deal on the podcast, take $100 off. This is going to be a little better than that. So, all right. Now, if you're one of my FYI, if you're one of my active students, this is free for you. So don't go and pay me. I don't want to have to pay you back. Yeah.
Okay, we got one fellow says, what if we already signed up for the course? How do we get the new discount?
Oh, I knew I was going to get that question. I'll give you.
How about we do this? Why don't they just email you and you can figure that one out?
Yeah, email me and we'll figure it out. I'll apply it to. I'll happily apply it towards some services or something like that. Yeah. So.
All right. So here's what the last question for tonight.
Okay.
Aren't you concerned about continuing to throw money into the trade every time you reverse Harvey?
No, you're actually taking money out of the trade when you reverse Harvey. Okay? Now, you are buying premium, you're buying strikes that are closer, but if you look as you reverse Harvey, okay, let's go to that 7th. Oh, I've got it on here. If you look, when I look at this chart, I say you're taking money out, not putting money in. Okay? You've taken over $6,000 off the table. Now, yeah, you cut your theta down a little bit, but you've taken money off the table and smoothed yourself. You've actually you're actually keeping more money in, okay, in my opinion. All right?
So you got a debit, so even though you got a debit, you've actually locked in.
Yeah, you've taken $6,000 off. Yeah, you've locked in some profit. You've taken $6,000 off the table. Okay? So the question is, will you, if you've got $25,000 in premium, okay, and you're risking that on the table, all right, and you're risking $12,000 for that $25,000 of premium, all right, you collect $2,500 of that premium, so you've got $2,500 in your pocket, okay. Now, would you rather try and collect $22,500 for $12,000 in risk, or excuse me, would you rather collect, risk that $2,500 and still leave $12,000 for the opportunity to maybe make an extra $500 over a week, or would you like to basically pocket $1,000 of that dollars? Okay? Give up, $500 of decay for a week, but also free up $6,000 in capital. That $6,000 you can use for something else. If you want to go and buy buy lottery tickets with that extra $6,000, you're now free to do so. I wouldn't suggest it, all right? But you're free to do so. All right? If you want to fly to Chicago and take me out to dinner with that extra $6,000, you are welcome to. No, I mean, you seriously are welcome to. And I would suggest that one. So, and you can bring my wife too, and we'll bring my wife. So she'd like that.
Well, Mark, we've done pretty good. We hit our scheduled stop time pretty much right on the mark.
I have to say, I think this was the fastest I've ever been at giving, and I would argue that this was my least cerebral, wouldn't you? I've been pretty. I tried to not be so so full of theory. What do you and have a little more application? But this is the type of stuff, people think I'm this big theory head. I'm all about application when I teach. Okay, my whole thought process is that you need to know what you're doing before you do it. Okay. So that's why I'm hard, but I think people appreciate that. So, all right.
Well, what we'll do is it takes a little while for me to convert the video, but it'll be up probably by the weekend. And
Okay,
I had people asking already whether we're going to have a video replay of it, and the answer is yes. We'll have it. It'll be in the video archive, and so you can watch it over and over and over again.
Yep.
So, but Mark, thank you very much for joining us and sharing the reverse Harvey.
Isn't that awesome? Isn't that an awesome name? It's really fun to say.
it sounds
It's great.
cool.
I'll be talking to students. I'll be like, you know what? Why don't you reverse Harvey that?
It sounds like it belongs.
It really does. So. All right. Well, I can't thank you enough for having me, and you've got such a great audience, and they always ask great questions, and they're smart, and it's a great group. So.
Well, we're happy to have you, Mark.
Couldn't be happier about it. All right. Well, thank you very much.
All right. Good night, everybody.